In the latest episode of Moonshiners Season 14, Mark and Digger dive deeper into the lucrative but risky world of aged bourbon production. With recruit Bruiser ramping up liquor production for the team, the pair invested in several charred oak barrels designed to age their product over 2 years. The duo meticulously prepares the barrels by filling them with water to ensure they swell and seal any potential leaks. However, tension rises when Mark notices an unknown vehicle watching their operations. Unable to identify the license plate, the team becomes concerned about their tens of thousands of dollars of liquor in storage. The looming threat of bankruptcy, or even jail time, adds weight to their decision-making. Digger voices his discomfort with the heightened risk of entering the aged liquor business. "We have to assume we've been caught," Mark admits. It's a sentiment that fuels Digger's growing anxiety. The duo decides to pivot their strategy, opting to sell smaller barrels directly to customers who can age the liquor themselves. Their new plan involves selling 8 5-gallon barrels for $1,500 each, providing immediate returns instead of waiting 2 years for them to age. They are looking to haul in $12,000 if they manage to sell all the small barrels to their customers. When Bruiser arrives with liquor to fill the barrels, he approves of the idea, acknowledging the financial advantages of cashing in upfront. The duo have been impressed with Bruiser's production, but it is unclear how long they can keep him on their team if they wrap up the bourbon business. The episode shows the delicate balance between ambition and risk in the underground liquor trade. While aging bourbon promises higher profits, the ever-present danger of legal consequences forces the Moonshiners to adapt their business model. As Season 14 unfolds, a teaser at the end of last week's episode suggests that the pair get arrested. However, fans will have to tune in to find out if they manage to sell the bourbon on time before the law rains down on them. The pair have had a lucrative season, selling their customers several variations of flavored liquor. So far in the season, they have made Papa liquor and elderberry-infused liquor with the help of Amanda Bryant. If Mark and Digger lose their bourbon stash, they may end up bankrupt or worse, behind bars. Moonshiners airs Tuesdays at 8/7 on the Discovery Channel. Moonshiners Season 14, Episode 9. Mark and Digger's bourbon venture takes a risky turn. The moonshine business in the Appalachian Mountains has always been fraught with risk, but Season 14 of Moonshiners introduces new heights of peril as Mark and Digger's latest venture takes a daring, high-stakes turn. Known for their masterful craft and innovative approach, the duo is always pushing the boundaries of what is possible in the world of moonshining. This season, however, they are stepping into uncharted territory: bourbon. While their previous runs of whiskey have been successful, they've long dreamed of making their mark in the world of high-end bourbon, a challenge that promises to be both exciting and terrifying. Bourbon, unlike whiskey, requires specific aging and maturation conditions, making the process significantly more complicated. But Mark and Digger aren't deterred. Instead, they are determined to prove that their skills, honed over years of experience, are up to the task. But as Episode 9 unravels, it becomes clear that their passion for perfection may cost them more than they bargained for. The Bourbon Dream, the episode, begins with Mark and Digger sitting around the campfire, sipping on their latest batch of homemade whiskey. Their conversation drifts to a new goal: to create the ultimate bourbon. They reminisce about their early days of moonshining, when it was all about making the best liquor they could. But bourbon, with its stringent regulations, is no easy feat. Unlike whiskey, which can be aged for a shorter period, bourbon needs a minimum of 2 years to reach its full potential, though many bourbons take 5 or even more. Mark leans forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "It's more than just about getting the mash right," he says. "It's about getting the time and the barrels right." We need to prove that we can craft a product that competes with the big names out there. Digger, ever the skeptic but always supportive, rubs his beard. I know, but it's a huge gamble. We're already behind schedule on our other projects. If this goes wrong, it could set us back for months. Mark nods. That's the risk. But if we nail it, we're not just making moonshine anymore. We're making something people will pay top dollar for. We could change everything. The first hurdles Mark and Digger's bourbon venture begins with selecting the right mash bill. For those unfamiliar with the process, the mash bill is the mixture of grains that forms the base of the whiskey. Bourbon requires at least 51% corn, with the rest typically consisting. The duo decides to experiment with a blend that is unique to their style: high corn, a touch of rye for spice, and just enough barley to give it a smooth finish. The first step seems simple enough, but the moment they start mixing the grains, things begin to take a turn. The equipment they use to mix and mash the grains is not designed for such a large scale, and they realize that the consistency of their mash isn't what it needs to be for bourbon. Mark checks the temperature of the mash, and it's too high. He knows this could lead to burnt grains, which would ruin the flavor. Digger, we're gonna have to start over, Mark says, frustration creeping into his voice. Digger, ever patient, wipes the sweat from his brow and mutters, I knew this wasn't gonna be easy, but let's get it right. They dump the mash, clean the equipment, and start from scratch. The tension is palpable. The clock is ticking, and they know the longer they take, the harder it will be to make a profit. Every hour lost in the process means more investment without a guaranteed return. Despite the setbacks, Mark and Digger push forward. The mash bill is corrected, and they begin the fermentation process. But as the days pass, they encounter another problem. The fermentation stalls. The yeast they use to convert the sugars into alcohol isn't working as efficiently as it should. This is nuts, Mark says, clearly exasperated. The mash is fine, but without the yeast doing its job, we're dead in the water. Digger examines the yeast packets and realizes they had accidentally grabbed an older batch, one that had been sitting in their workshop for too long. They head into town to purchase a fresh supply. When they return, they're faced with yet another setback. The local authorities have ramped up their patrols. The area has become a hotbed for bootlegging activity, and Mark and Digger's operation is now on the radar of the law. The big gamble's next major hurdle comes when they finally manage to get the fermentation process going. With the mash bill corrected and the yeast back in action, they are finally able to move on to distilling. But even with the fermentation issue behind them, the duo is still facing mounting pressure. They need to age the bourbon in charred oak barrels for at least 2 years, but they're running out of time. As if that wasn't enough, Digger's back injury from a few seasons ago flares up. He's unable to help Mark with the heavy lifting of moving the barrels and setting up the aging process. Mark tries to take on all the tasks himself, but he's quickly overwhelmed. The deadline to send their product to market looms large, and he knows that if they don't get this right, they could lose everything they've invested. As the two struggle to get the barrels filled, Mark makes a bold decision. We're going to take a chance, he declares. We'll age it for 6 months instead of 2 years. It's not ideal, but the flavor is there. We'll push it hard and release it as a special batch. Digger, though reluctant, agrees. If we're doing this, we're doing it our way. Let's see if we can pull it off. The first taste 6 months later, the day has arrived for Mark and Digger to taste their bourbon. The barrels have been stored in a secluded, temperature-controlled barn deep in the hills, away from prying eyes. They've managed to keep their operation under wraps for the most part, but the truth is that they've been walking a fine line. Mark cracks open the first barrel with a mix of anticipation and dread. He pours a sample into 2 glasses and hands one to Digger. They take a sip. The tension in the air is palpable. Digger swirls the liquid in his glass, takes another sip, and slowly sets it down. "Well, what do you think?" Mark asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Digger looks at him, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he finally says, "It's good. Real good. But it's not there yet. Not for a full release. The flavor's strong, but it's too harsh. We didn't give it enough time." Mark nods. He knew the gamble was risky, but he had hoped for a miracle. Instead, the harsh reality hits him. They don't have the time or resources to perfect this batch the way they had envisioned. The bourbon is good, but it's not the high-end, premium product they had hoped for. The consequences. Mark and Digger sit back and contemplate their next move. They receive an unexpected visitor, a representative from a large distillery who has been following their progress. The rep has heard rumors about the duo's daring bourbon venture and is interested in a potential partnership. "Listen," the rep says, "we've tasted your stuff. It's not ready for the shelves yet, but with a little help from us, you could really make something special. We're willing to invest in you. But you need to get back to the drawing board." Mark and Digger exchange looks. The offer is tempting, but it also feels like a blow to their pride. They've spent years building their operation from the ground.